Listen, can you hear that? That isn't thunder. That is the sound of the earth grinding its teeth. April 18th, 1906, 5:12 a.m. San Francisco is sleeping. A boomtown built on gold, opium, and hubris. It feels solid. It feels permanent. But it is sleeping on top of a geological time bomb. In 1 second, the San Andreas Fault decides to wake up. It slips nearly 300 miles. Look at this seismogram. The needle didn't just wiggle. It slammed off the paper. The energy release is equivalent to 600 million tons of TNT. The horses knew first. Animals always do. But brick and mortar, they don't have instincts. They only have physics. And physics is about to collect a debt. Forget the skyscrapers for a moment. Look down. The first betrayal didn't come from the sky. It came from the dirt. Much of San Francisco was built on made ground, loose soil and debris dumped into the bay to create real estate. When the shaking started, a terrifying phenomenon occurred. Liquefaction. Imagine shaking a bowl of wet sand. The water pressure rises, pushing the sand grains apart. The solid ground instantly turns into a heavy liquid soup. It loses all structural integrity. Out at Olema, the earth tore apart, shifting fences by 8 feet. But in the city, the ground didn't just tear, it dissolved. Look at the Valencia Street Hotel. This is the definition of a nightmare. The building didn't fall over, it sank. The liquidity of the soil swallowed the first 3 stories whole. Those people didn't die from the fall. They were buried alive in the mud of their own foundation. This is the price of ignoring geology. You cannot cheat the soil. As the ground turned to water, the symbols of man's power turned to dust. The City Hall, a masterpiece of corruption and stone, taking 27 years to build. It lasted 48 seconds. Look at this ruin. It looks like Rome after the Vandals. The problem here was simple: unreinforced masonry. Brick without steel is just a stack of cards. When the shear waves hit, the mortar bonds snapped. The majestic stone facade peeled away, leaving the steel skeleton naked and ashamed. The churches and theaters followed suit. God and art were no match for the S-waves. On the clock tower of Old Street Mary's, the inscription remained: "Observe the time and fly from evil." A cruel irony. Because the survivors, observing the time, were about to realize the earthquake was just the opening act. The evil was just arriving. Now, close your eyes. I want you to smell the air. It starts with the sulfur. Rotten eggs. Thousands of gas mains ruptured instantly, filling the streets with explosive vapor. Then, the smell of wood smoke dry. Old Victorian redwood catching spark from overturned stoves. Arnold Genther captured this moment. The people watching. They aren't running. They are paralyzed. They are breathing in a cocktail of burning paint, melting tar, and the salty breeze from the bay. The heat grew so intense it created its own weather system. A firestorm. The temperature at the core hit 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. Look at the steel beams at Post and Grant. Steel doesn't burn, but at that temperature it loses its will. It softens. It droops like wet pasta. The asphalt in the streets bubbled and boiled, trapping wagons and people alike. The city didn't just burn, it cooked. The fire raged for 3 days. When the smoke cleared, 250,000 people, half the population, were homeless. But here is where the story changes texture. It shifts from horror to grit. They walked. Miles of walking on blistered feet, dragging trunks across cobblestones that were still hot to the touch. The sound of dragging metal was the soundtrack of the exodus. Those who stayed adapted with frightening speed. General Funston ordered, "No fires indoors." So life moved to the curb. Look at the texture of these stoves. They are bricolage, made from the rubble of their own chimneys. A woman in a fine Edwardian dress, covered in soot, frying bacon on a pile of broken bricks. The smell of coffee now mixed with the ash. It was the smell of defiance. Golden Gate Park became a city within a city. The rich from Nob Hill sat on salvaged velvet chairs. The poor from the docks sat on crates. Feel the fabric of those army tents, rough canvas, damp from the fog. In the breadlines, the banker stood behind the laborer. For a brief moment, the earthquake leveled the social hierarchy just as effectively as it leveled the buildings. But not everyone made it to the park. In Portsmouth Square, the grass was turned over for temporary graves. The silence there was heavy. We will never know the true death toll. Officials said 700 to protect the economy. History says 3,000. How do you comprehend total destruction? You can't see it from the ground. You need God's eye view. George Lawrence couldn't fly a balloon. The heat thermals were too dangerous. So he built a captive airship, a train of giant kites, lifting a 50-pound panoramic camera. Behold, the autopsy of a metropolis. From the Bay to Van Ness Avenue, 4 square miles of ash. It looks like the surface of the moon, carved by humans. You can see the grid, but the buildings are gone. Just chimneys standing like tombstones. And there, in the distance, the Golden Gate. No bridge yet, just the open water, reflecting the setting sun. The light catches the dust, hanging in the air, turning the sunset a bruised purple. It is beautiful. And it is terrifying. San Francisco rose again, bigger, taller. But these photos, these glass plates and silver halides, they are not just memories, they are warnings. They teach us that the earth is not solid, it is fluid, it moves. We replaced the brick with steel. We reinforced the concrete, but we are still building on the same fault line. The question isn't if it will happen again. The question is, when the next big one hits, will our architecture stand? Or will we be digging through the rubble of our own hubris once more? I'm Winston Halloway. Now, where should we dig next? New Amsterdam, the 1660s. See Manhattan before the steel, when it was just a Dutch village of windmills and gables. Or Pompeii. During the 19th century excavations, we returned to the disaster. But this time, to uncover vibrant frescoes that will wake up your eyes. Tell me, the archives are open.